Don Miguel, it is so great. I'm so grateful that you said yes to sitting down with us today. Our community so loved you when you came the last time, and all my love to you and your family. And this is just extraordinary times, and so many of us are consciously seeking spirituality and to stay in our lane and stay grounded. And so I loved, and we used it as your book of the month, as our book of the month, as you know. I loved your book about the 7 secrets to happy, healthy relationships. And we're around some people in our lives a little bit more than normal right now. Some of these relationships are intimate relationships, and now we're seeing each other on Zoom, and work relationships have changed and all this. So what are some of the things that you think are significant to keep in mind right now as things have changed so rapidly and are going to stay this way for a little bit?
Well, thank you so much, Reverend Karen. Thank you so much for having me in your program. And hello, everyone, and CSLDallas. Thank you so much. I look forward to being back and fond memories of being there. Um, the thing about these times is it's unprecedented. It's our turn to go through some turmoil in the world. And, first, my deepest condolences to anyone who has lost a loved one during these times. And also my deepest condolences to the people who are struggling financially, who've lost their business, or they're having a hard time with the bills and close to foreclosure and all that. It's what's happening. Like in my own life, I've lost 2 uncles to this virus. And I've also had friends who have lost their businesses, and they're going through hard times. So I've seen both sides of the equation, and regardless of the politics that are clouding a lot of the things that are happening right now, at the very bottom there is the human tragedy, and that is happening with people losing lives. Some people are getting healthy, thank God, but few of them, like my uncles, may they rest in peace, who didn't. My uncle Javier and my uncle Cesar did not make it, did not survive this. And just like my dear friend Jay and Han, they lost their restaurant. And I have other friends who are really in a very tough times. I have a friend who they're about to expect the first baby, and they gave him a month, like a month to, like, he's gonna lose his job in 1 month, and there goes his bonuses and everything is invested. So I can see it. So at the very bottom, take all the politics, and you see the human experience that is happening. And that is the basis of how we engage each other, compassion, the ability to engage the people in our lives. All of us in different stages are going through some mourning. My kids, for example, they've been at home for about a month and a half, and they're really missing their friends. My daughter's really missing this stage in her life. My son, who has autism, the change in his schedule has thrown him off completely. So we're trying to get him into a routine that makes him feel safe. If you know anything about autism, that schedule is very important, because it's what makes them feel safe. If you leave it without schedule, it's kind of a little difficult. I also have friends who are teachers, and they're really missing their students. There's the people who are work, and then there's the people who are essential workers who are having to go out there, and they're having the ups and downs of everything that's happening. And at the same time, we're also dealing with people who are going through their own anxiety of what's happening. If we're staying at home and we're healthy, we're in a comfortable place, we're still dealing with all these uncertainties. And sometimes we branch out into what we know, or sometimes we go into politics and we feel like that has something control. But if you look at all the people, they're just trying to find something to hold on to make them feel like they're safe, that they're doing something, but yet we're in this place. So in a time like this, compassion is the key to understand each other. We all handle that level of stress differently. We all handle the things in a different way. My son handles his stress in his own way. My daughter handles it in a totally different way. I have my friends who are dealing with it in their own way. Some of them are in really hard straits. Some of them are doing very good. Some of them are thriving. There's people who are thriving during all this time. There are people who are, they have their own set beliefs and they are using that to go either left or right, and they're really writing and they have the blinders on. That's happening. It's one of those things that we're watching something that is unique. It's like we have ancestors who survived the Great Depression. We have ancestors who've survived several kind of wars and pandemics and different aspects. The Spanish flu, or like our great great grandparents had to deal with that, and it's just our turn. So, in this stage, the ability to have compassion for one another is the thing that helps us. Right now, my wife and I, selfishly, I'm going to say this, I've enjoyed my time with my wife because for the last month or 2 months, I've spent more time with her together than we've had in the last 10 years, especially since I released my book and I've been on tour. It's been nice to be both in the same house. And she also got furloughed for about a month and a half. And it's nice to have that. We get to know each other again, and that from that aspect of being together and find out that we love each other very much. And it's in those times, when I often tell people, it's when you're by yourself. When you're by yourself and you don't like being by yourself, there's something off, then your status, your relationship status is complicated, just using the Facebook analogy there. But if you're by yourself and you feel comfortable, you're at ease because you're spending time with someone you enjoy being, which is yourself, then your status with yourself is good. It's in that stage where you realize that relationship between your mind and your heart, or left hemisphere, right hemisphere, if that's in balance, when you're alone, you will feel that. But if you're by yourself and this is unbalanced, there's some going on, it's really hard to be with yourself. That's when when the relationship within yourself, there's something to work on. There's something that you're going to want to process if that's what you want. We heal with our own permission. If that's happening within our own self, when we find ourselves together with other people, we find those things that we need to heal or we're not. For example, this whole social isolation reminds me of a play by Sartre, No Exit, where in the concept of the play is hell is other people. And it's basically three people who are in a room without any doors or windows, and they're stuck. And at first they're okay, but little by little they get each other's nerves, right? Well, all those things are what's coming up. Is all those unhealed processes, all these beliefs, all these conditional ideas and beliefs that become a wedge in our life. So when couples come and ask me for advice, I always ask the same question: do you guys want to stay together? If they both say yes, the rest is easy, because that mutual yes is the motivator that allows us to work things through. And that's the beautiful thing. It's the motivator. My wife, when my stepmom, may she rest in peace, asked my wife, how were you guys able to handle the culture clash between you? My wife answered it beautifully: because we love each other. And it is that mutual love that allows us to find those common ground, that bridge that allows us to enjoy each other, to not let our upbringing and our cultures divide us, and find that common ground. If they both say no, that's also easy, because you both are saying the truth. Sometimes that happens, and it's totally okay. When you reach that point where you both say no, you both are saying your truth, and respecting that truth allows you to go, okay, well, let's reinvent this relationship. Maybe it doesn't work romantically. Let's reinvent it as brother and sister. That's happened in my life. I've had an ex-girlfriend who we broke up, but we still loved each other, but not in that way anymore. So we became good friends. Then there's the one that's typical, where one says yes and the other one says no, and that's more trying to convince each other, and that's where it requires a lot more work, or actually it's confusing, because you're basically trying to convince someone else to change their mind, and that's when it gets convoluted. The ability to go into that and find out where your reality is comes from compassion for yourself, compassion for your beloved, your family members, your friends, and seeing life from their point of view. And it requires the willingness to listen to what their truth is, what they're feeling. Sometimes, for example, with my wife, she vents, but she's not really asking me to fix anything. She just wants someone to be her witness, to hold space for her.
Yes.
And she is figuring it out herself. It took me a long time to figure it. We've been together 16 years. So I got to that point where when she's venting, I'm just sit there going, listening, ask the right question at one point because I'm listening, you know. And I know she's not asking me to fix anything, but she's asking me to be there for her, to let her work things through herself. And sometimes we work things together in that same way. It's the willingness to listen, which is what allows us to thrive in these kind of circumstances. Because in these circumstances is when we begin to face not only our hurdles that brings those wedges together, but it allows us to process out loud our fears, our anger, our conditioned beliefs, and we're giving each other the space to listen to one another. You know, my daughter opens up, you know, eventually after a month and a half, she finally opened up and we didn't have to pry. She opened up herself and it was beautiful. My son, the same thing, you know, when we do the online class and he gets really hyper after he sees all his classmates in the video, he really is saying, when is this coronavirus gonna end? You know, he has this desire. Seeing it from their point of view allows us to see the human being that they are, and they're doing the best with what they've got. So that's the beautiful thing about having a relationship right now. You know, it's like, I understand my friends who are grieving a family member. You know, I'm one of them. I also understand my friends who are grieving the loss of a business or the stress of paying the bills and keeping the whole family afloat, and at danger of losing their home to become homeless. And that's the biggest fear we have, right?
Right.
Alongside all the other mental stuff that's happening right now, you know, because right now it's like, do we pay attention to the homework, the whole school, the homeschooling, or the homework, whatever? And what I mean by that, homework is like the work we do as adults as well. Or do we are there for each other and helping each other find that mental health, that spiritual health that allows us to find our space? You know, for example, my wife, she and I this morning sat together, had a cup of coffee, watched um, Sherlock Holmes BBC show. We liked that one. And when we finished that, we went for a 3-mile run. And we did this because we know our son stayed up late and he's going to wake up sometime around noon or something like that. He's a teenager after all. So we find that little space for each other. So when he wakes up, we're like refreshed, we're in our center. And it's the thing that allows us to be a team. You know, it's like, it's not about it's her role, my responsibility. No, it's all hands on deck. We're helping each other. And that's what I find comforting.
Wow, I love that, Don Miguel. So I I loved how you said not only, this is a time for compassion. So it's truly a time for compassion. It's a time for listening, to listen to one another. I also appreciate how you said that sometimes your wife wants to just vent and you don't have to fix something, and I can relate with that. And sometimes I try to fix it, and that's not good. It's like, no, I don't need you to fix anything. I just need you to listen. Can you just let me vent? And you're saying, like, yes, Karen, remember that. And I need to keep remembering that. And the profound thing that you have just shared, I mean, like, and all of that is, this is a time where I feel like many of us have slowed down enough to be with ourselves and what's getting triggered and what's getting pressed upon. And that's the very thing during this time that we need to pay attention to. And it's a time to shift that, to heal that dis-ease when we look at ourselves, not the other, but ourselves in this moment.
Yeah, it's one of those things that when we give compassion for others, it starts with a compassion for ourselves, to listen to ourselves. Sometimes in those quiet moments, you know, that's something I do, is like, I have my little corner and I go and sit down there for a little bit. You know, the dogs follow me and they sit next to me, and that's nice. and I have a good 15-20 minutes of just like, it's like, and I find that in my family, all four of us, my wife, myself, my children, at one point of the day, we all go in different spaces of the home, and we ground ourselves in our own solitude, in our own space, and it's funny how a house can get so quiet when all four of us, in our own individual times, in our own individual space, find that ground, kind of like this refueling. And sometimes some parents don't get this, because the child wants like that. My dogs follow me. They're like my shadow, like especially my German Shepherd Chihuahua dog. It's Teo is both German Shepherd and Chihuahua. We did genetic test. That's that's kind of dog we have, and he's my shadow. But finding those spaces and finding what allows you to not only ground yourself, but if you're going through a process to process things, you give yourself that space to do so. Because sometimes, just like we were talking about before, where sometimes we hold space for someone else to let them figure it out. Sometimes that requires us as well. Sometimes we may not be comfortable doing that with other people. Sometimes we just want to do it within ourselves, and that's silence. I almost think that's the most important element to this relationship, the relationship within ourselves, giving ourselves the permission to work for ourselves without anyone hearing our own process. And sometimes that just requires silence. Sometimes. And it feels good.
Yeah. Beautiful. It does. Yes. And in the silence, I know for me, there used to be years ago, I wasn't comfortable with just myself in the silence at first. And I had to be willing to sit in it with myself over and over again. And over time, I got comfortable with it. And then over time, I actually wanted that. And sometimes our lives can get so full that that's not a priority, to have that space with ourselves in the silence. And I love how you and a family of four, and just the makeup of your family, that you get to do that every day. Like, that seems like that's a priority.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's love. And I've taken my son and my daughter out once in a while. We put on the mask and all that kind of thing, and Alejandro sees that. He's like, oh, he sees everyone with the mask, and everything he sees for the first time. So it's been interesting explaining that to the world, but it's one of the things, little by little we adapt to it. They're going to have a memory of it, and it's going to be unique to our own, but it just happens to be our turn. When people say our generation is the toughest parenting, our parents never had to deal with what we had to deal with. And my answer to them is, well, it's only difficult because it's our turn. Imagine raising your child in the 60s, like my grandmother had, and my grandparents had to deal with my parents. I imagine raising your child in the middle of a Mexican revolution, like my great grandfather had to do with my grandma. Raising a child during the dictatorship in Mexico, like my great grandpa had to do with my great grandfather, and so on and so forth. Every generation is tough because it's their turn. It's just our turn. This is our moment. And it reminds me of something that happened in that J.K. Tolkien said during the Lord of the Rings, where Frodo was telling Gandalf, I wish we weren't living in such times. And Gandalf replies, me too. And so does everyone else living in these times. But that is not our choice. This is our what we're going through, and it's up to us what we're going to do with this. And that's the thing. What are we going to do with this? Are we going to be there for one another? Are we going to use this time to improve something about ourselves and learn a skill? Are we going to use this to reinforce whatever prejudice or fear we already had? Or what are we going to do? And that's the beautiful thing. It's like, some people will go in different paths, and we can also make the choice of finding our own path. And that could be from helping to giving that voice of hope to someone else. or seeing how we can contribute to our community. And that's what we're being asked to do, kind of like Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. It's the call to action. What are we going to do? It's our turn. How are we going to choose to engage? And at this moment, my choice is to help my family go through all of this process. And it's been interesting to witness my children, my wife, and myself go through this. And to be honest with you, I feel like we're coming out of it quite strong. And that's with this, that's the blessing. And at the same time, like I said before, I think of my aunt who lost her husband and her brother within 2 weeks of one another. I think of my friends who lost their job and all that. And instead of pitying them, I have compassion and respect for them. That's what their journey is. And I'm here to help if that's what they need. And that's it. How can I help you?
Beautiful. Yes, we are collectively, consciously or not, and many of us are consciously choosing how we want to contribute to creating a new normal. And like you said, coming out of this, your family's going to be closer together. Well, we can consciously choose to create a new normal where collectively in humanity, we are stronger together. You know, we can consciously choose to let go of those prejudices or the idea of separation or anything that is causing that. I believe many of us are using this time to do that, and that how can I serve you and everyone else. So, you know, we've said this as a community. We don't want to go back, and we're not going back. And there's some things about life as it was that wasn't normal to begin with. So we're creating a new normal here consciously. I trust. Yes.
I completely agree with you. You know, for me, what I've found and where I've arrived in, like, the new normal for me is realizing, one, there was no such thing as normal. You know, it's always changing. You know, as a parent, we know this very much. You know, every time we have a birthday, life changes. But the key thing that's going to change, or at least in my point of view, and that's across the board, I believe, is that we won't be taking certain things for granted anymore. And from that is, you know, the workers right now that are helping, you know, we go to a grocery store. To my point of view, the thing that's kept this situation from really deteriorating is those people who have worked in grocery stores. Not just the doctors and the nurses have been helping so many people. They really are heroes, you know, from the point of view that they're saving lives. But what has helped us maintain a sense of community are the people who are working in our grocery stores, the people who are driving the trucks, you know, the people who are cleaning up, and the farmers, the workers, and all those places where we generate our food. You know, all those things that are essential. The people who are still working at the electricity plant, or all those things, the little mundane things that we take for granted.
Yes.
We realize that, you know, it's important. You know, their work. If they don't work, our civilization goes. And to take them for granted is something that, if we no longer do that and we appreciate them, our whole perception of everything changes. You know, like from the servers, you know, as we go to a restaurant, our server doesn't have to serve us with the quality of the work they do, but yet they do it in such a way, and we're grateful to them. You know, the people who prepare our food in that way, the people who are cleaning, the people who are working on the road, all these things that we've taken for granted, alongside with our relationship with the people we love. Because, you know, for example, with my daughter, they're missing their friends. They're not missing out. You know, missing out means that the grass is greener somewhere else. Right. They're missing the connections with other human beings. And that missing, you know, we don't take for granted the communion we have with the people we love, be it friends, be it family, be it co-workers, be it all these things, not to take that for granted, not to take each other for granted. normally that happens when someone passes away and we realize we wasted all this time on this disagreements. But at the same time, you look at those things and you look at for who they are. Sometimes it's good to unfollow certain people on social media, because sometimes where they're going through some process, and hitting that unfollow is sometimes good for your mental health. You know, it's you're getting rid of some of those triggers. But know that if you unfollow them on social media, that doesn't mean that you're no longer friends or family with that person. At this moment, you're finding that thing. It's that balance. It's always that balance. And the key to not taking things personally or not taking something for granted is exactly what's going to fuel or shape what is, you know, not even the new normal. Like, let go of the normal. It's gonna be unique. It's gonna be something we create. We
Yes.
can either let fear continue to rule our lives, or we can respect fear one more time and see, you know, we can get through it. You know, so like my son, you know, we had to draw some blood a couple of years back to do some analysis. And the nurse was telling my son, don't be afraid, be brave. And I said to my son, no, Miguel, it's okay to be afraid. What makes us brave is facing our fear and see that we're okay. And sometimes acknowledging our fear, this scares me, this hurts, this brings anxiety to me. That's usually the first step to admitting this is how I feel, this is my reality. And from there, I can change my direction in life. I can change the path. How do I want to change it? And the beautiful thing about that question is only we get to answer that, the individual or the community or as a group.
Yes.
That's family.
Ah, beautiful. Beautiful, Don Miguel. Thank you. So I have a question for you. It's the anything else question. Is there anything else that you'd like to share before we depart for now? But is there anything else you want to share in this moment that your heart speaks or wants to say?
Sure. You know, like I'll share something that within the special needs families tell one another, because
Okay.
especially those of us who have an older child or son or daughter who are going through this, tell someone who's just gotten the diagnosis, it gets better. You know, it's when you have a child that just recently got diagnosed, you know, you go through a lot of fear, you go through a lot of anxiety, you go through a lot of this stuff because of the unknown. And what dies is what we grieve is whatever image we have of who they're going to be, and everything changes just a bit. And we go through the process. And yes, it's a roller coaster. Sometimes there's an up, sometimes there's downs. The downs can be outright scary. The highs can be incredible, phenomenal, beautiful. It gets better. So what I'm going to tell everyone here is that it gets better. You know, generations prior to us went through worse things and they got better. You know, the Spanish flu, the wars, the Great Depression, just those three, it got better. And it got better by the effort we apply of moving the story forward, get ourselves ready, not just to work, but to engage each other. And that's the thing, you know, what makes us a parent is the same thing that makes us a husband or a wife or a beloved or a son or whatever. Effort. The willingness to engage is what a child is what makes us a parent. Any person can bring a child into the world, but what makes us a parent is the willingness to engage. And sometimes that child is not biologically yours, but you engage and you create that relationship. And that is the key, engaging. And that's how we move the story forward. That's how things get better. And yes, sometimes it's tough. I'm not gonna lie to you. Sometimes it's downright, you face fears that you've never experienced before. And somehow, some way, those fears dissipate by allowing that same person that caused those fears to blossom right in front of your eyes. You know, like for example, my son, especially during this whole school distancing, social distance, school distancing, right? I forgot the term, right? We've been trying to make him read out loud. And then this week, my son surprised us. He was answering questions, mathematical questions, so fast that we think he was just guessing. But I went back to review it, and I realized some of those questions require you to read it. There's no shortcut. You have to read it. And he was reading it so fast, and realized that his verbal skills are very low. Yes, his nonverbal skills are very high. And also my son showed a level of complexity that we've seen before. As a psychiatrist, psychologist have talked about it. His teachers have seen it. But I finally saw it in a way that, in a form of a mathematical problem. It took forever to make him read it out loud. But when he was solving the problem, he read it so fast that it made me think he didn't read it, but he did. And he got the answer right. And the only way he got the answer right is that he read all of the mathematical problem. Wow. It gets better. Give him a chance to show you how much they've blossomed. Don't let the projection of whatever diagnosis cloud your mind, and translate that not just to parents with special needs children, but anyone, parents, life partners, relationships, coworkers. Let them show you who they are. Don't let whatever projection you have of them blind you to who they are. Withdraw that projection and learn to listen. And wow, the changes that can happen.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you, Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. Thank you for engaging with us. Thank you for taking the time to engage with us so that we can continue to engage with one another in a better way, because it does get better at all levels. And I know that. And I'm so grateful for your time. I'm so grateful for who you are. And I wish you and your family and your extended family and all your friends all the best there. And until we meet again, you be well and thrive till then. All right.
And I look forward to being back at CSLDallas. And thank you so much for the opportunity to engage in your community today. And thank you so much for the conversation. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Miguel.